In a decisive move to rein in exorbitant travel expenditures, President Bola Tinubu has issued a sweeping directive slashing his future entourage for both domestic and international events by a staggering 60%. This directive applies to all federal MDAs, the Office of the President, Office of the Vice President, the First Lady and wife of the Vice President. State House correspondent Adesua Omoran reports.
It's crunch time, and fostering fiscal responsibility in the corridors of power is the aim of Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, who has come under mounting scrutiny over the cost of official trips in the last 7 months. A prevalent trend among top government officials in Africa is their penchant for extensive travel with large delegations, despite the strain on their supposedly ailing economies. In the past 7 months, both President Bola Tinubu and Vice President Kashim Shettima have collectively visited 16 countries, defending these trips as vital for driving foreign direct investment into Nigeria. But critics question the economic impact, particularly given the size of the accompanying delegations. Today, Tinubu has announced sweeping financial austerity measures affecting all federal ministries, departments and agencies, the Office of the President, the Office of the Vice President, and that of the First Lady.
4 members of their staff, appointees and the like, will be allowed to travel with a minister on an official trip. For heads of agency, that will be limited to 2 members of staff allowed to travel on an official trip. Furthermore, the numbers that the president has now approved for official travel with him that will apply to his principal staff are as follows. On international trips, the president has directed that no more than 20 individuals be allowed to travel with him. That number will be cut down to 5 in the case of the First Lady. Additionally, the number in the entourage on official international trips for the Vice President will be cut to 5. The number that will be placed as a limit on the wife of the Vice President is also 5.
These cost-cutting measures extend to travels within the country.
In terms of local trips, the President has approved a new limit of 25 members of staff to accompany him on domestic trips within the country. The Office of the First Lady is now limited to 10 staff members to accompany her on official trips within the country. The Vice President will be limited to 15 members of staff on official trips within the country, while his wife will be limited to 10 members of staff on official trips within the country. You will find that the numbers on international trips are less than those allowed on domestic trips. This is because international trips are far more expensive.
And an additional caveat that extensive security delegations accompanying the President and the Vice President during local trips will cease to exist.
When Mr. President or the Vice President travels to any state within the country, the massive bills that accrued due to allowances and ESTA code for security detail coming from Abuja, going and traveling into those states, will be massively cut due to the directive of the President that the security outfits within states, whether it be police, DSS, or branches of the military, will frontline his protective detail when he travels to those states.
This decision follows the controversy surrounding the federal government's contentious 1,411 delegates to the United Nations Annual Climate Summit, COP28, in Dubai about a month ago. It remains to be seen if President Tinubu's actions align with his words and what consequences may await defaulters. Adesua Omoruan, Arise News.
Cost in the cut in the cost of governance, 60% in terms of the number of people who would be following in terms of aides and personal staff, the President, Vice President, ministers, just like Adesua Omoruan reports, and their wives as well. We'll fire your take on this.
President Tinubu has done very, very well. And this morning, I say kudos to him. I give him a very big sadankata, like they say, and I give him kudos. He has listened to us what we yearned for. Because we all talked about that trip to Dubai being very frivolous. The humongous number of people on that jamboree to Dubai was frivolous and insensitive. It's a very good one. But I would like him to go further and do something for Nigerians. Can we have a line item of the cost per trip, both local or international, for the president? Let's even have a line item so that we know the cost we are dealing with. I'm happy that he has greatly reduced the number of aides and people that follow him on these trips. And as he said, it's the security details in those areas he goes locally, that will administer his security. But it remains to be seen. Hope we will not see that humongous detail like the one we had at the mosque in Lagos only recently. How did that cost come out? We also need transparency on the cost of security detail and what it cost taxpayers to keep President Tinubu over the Yuletide period in Lagos. And for all those trips, we need a line item so we can know what we're dealing with. But it's a very good decision. The part I have a little quibble with is that of the First Lady. I've always argued, I do not think we should give the First Lady any special treatment. She's just the wife of the president. So having a retinue of staff for her and all of that, no. If we can cut that completely, because it's not in line with what we have in the Constitution. The Constitution does not have a specific role for the First Lady. But this 60% slash, very good. The devil is in the detail, as they say, and also the devil is in implementation of this. But on the surface of it, very, very good kudos to President Tinubu. This is what we want to hear, and very more cuts are expected. But we need the line items on those trips.
All right.
Okay, you recall that when President Tinubu went to attend the COP28 conference in Dubai recently, Nigerians were alarmed that we had a delegation that was as large as that of China and other countries, 1,411 it was said. Although the Minister of Information walked back and said the total was just 442. But in terms of cost, Nigerians were alarmed that ran into billions of money in terms of cost. Secondly, even within Nigeria, there have been concerns expressed about the presidential entourage, especially. The most recent instance being when the president visited Lagos for the Christmas, New Year festivities. And on a Friday, he was going to a mosque inside Lagos with a convoy that ran into, kilometers, and Nigerians were alarmed. So, on the surface of it, this will appear clearly as President Tinubu responding to public outrage. And as Ajuri Ngelale, his spokesperson, pointed out, the objective is to cut wastage. And I think that, perception being very important in the governance process, this would run very well, sit very well with Nigerians who have been expressing concern about conspicuous governance, about the fat nature of the governing process. And people have been asking for a leaner government. However, the question to ask is this: when the president says he's slashing by 60% the entourage, what exactly is being slashed? The president says when he travels abroad, he will not go with more than 20 persons as members of his entourage. Now, that 20, what constitutes that 20? Because when the president moves, there's an advance team. The media department, for example, will go with about 5-6 persons who will be on the ground. The media department will have its officers who will have gone there to make arrangements, liaise with the media unit in that particular country. And then, of course, there will be correspondents from the various media houses who will travel also for proper coverage. And then there will be official photographer, there will be official cameraman. So if you look at that number, then the president's medical team is part of that advanced team, with the chief physician traveling as part of his own entourage. So the medical team will have been ahead because he travels with a team of specialists. They are doing their professional work. Security from NIA, from some other departments will also be part of that advanced team. They are doing professional work. Then you will have from the protocol department, there will be an advanced team that will have gone ahead from the office of the state chief of protocol to arrange accommodation, movement, and logistics and all of that. So if you look at that number already, that number alone will exceed or get close to 20, even if you try to prune it down. Okay? So now, when the president is traveling, because of the nature of the program, depending on the nature of the program, he may need certain subject area experts to go with him. If he's going to an economic conference, for example, he will need maybe the Minister of Economic Planning, or he may need the Minister of Finance, or he may need heads of specific departments and agencies of government who will be there as professionals. Now, where I think we have to look at is not necessarily people who are following him to do professional work, but all these hangers-on that end up on the list of the president. But there will be people who will have to go in advance. Now, inside Nigeria for local trips, the president says, okay, the number maximum will be 25. That certainly cannot also include those various departments who are doing professional work. So people should just be aware of that. That's part of the details, I imagine. Now, the president says he will use the security on the ground in the relevant states. That's fine. So he will cut down on obstacles. But there is also around the president, the presidential guard that will go with him everywhere, because their primary duty is to protect the president of Nigeria. I hope that's not what they are cutting down, because that's the responsibility of NIA in particular, if it is in international trade. If it is in Nigeria, there are specific units that their job is to protect the president of Nigeria. And that's when the president moves. You see there is a concentric circle. It's a layer behind them, you know, and each person knows where to stand within that layer. Those ones, you cannot cut them off. But what Nigerians are asking for is that, you know, the president should pay attention to areas of wastage, areas of leakage, and every trip should not be a jamboree. In 7 months, the president and the vice president, they've traveled abroad 16 times. The president has been abroad 55 days. The vice president has been abroad for a total of 36 days. Cumulatively, both of them have been abroad in terms of stay for 91 days. They've traveled cumulatively to 16 countries. So these are some of the details in this regard, but it should go beyond just entourage. People accompanying the president. The size of the convoy can be pruned down. And then there are also many areas of wastage, of leakage within the government that government needs to address. We'll be asking government to go back to the Oronsaye report, which talks about duplication in terms of government functions, in terms of departments and agencies of government and ministries. And that all of these agencies should be rationalized. We discussed it for 8 years. Under the Buhari administration, nobody touched it. We are bringing up the topic again. You don't need to have ministries doing the same thing, you know, employing the same people doing nothing. Half of the time, most of them are loitering around. And you'll be surprised, maybe some of these people are even graduates from some of these universities whose accreditation has been withdrawn. But that's another thing about the quality of our civil service. So there are other areas that the president can also look at. Let him start with the Oronsaye report, if this is really meant to be an attempt to provide a lean government. And I hope the state governors will follow the example, because state governors too, you know, when a state governor is moving, the same man that we were drinking together in the club before he became governor, he will suddenly turn himself into some kind of a messianic personality, forgetting that he's coming back to that club to come and sit down with us, and he will learn to live normal life. So people should just run their offices with a sense of moderation.
What club is that?
No, I raise the case for now.
Well, if I want to go there, so you can potentially, rub shoulders.
It's a governor's club. Former governors were drinking the
I don't know if Dr. Bat is more miffed at the fact that they don't come back to the social club, or they start to misbehave. But Very well said and excellent. And we have the honor of having Dr. Bati, who's also been a member of the professional services team when he during his time with the presidency. So we have details of what the team entails. But let me just add a few more things to this particular story. As everyone has said, very welcome development. And I think it speaks very well of the president, especially with regard to the fact that he demonstrates that he listens. And we have seen that a few times during this administration, and it all goes well. And I believe that it's something that we must speak up about so that it will continue. Long may this continue. We remember, just yesterday and the last few days, and we're going to be talking about that again this morning, the issue around the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and the suspension of the minister, again, seeming like the president listening to wise counsel and the voice of the people. That is quite excellent. Now, with regards to the details, Dr. Abati has talked about the professional, the people who go ahead in terms of professional services who might not be captured in the number of 20 that Mr. Ngalale has talked about. If that is the case, and we have all these professional, the security team, protocol team, and the likes, which even in that, especially the protocol team, it's been said that the numbers could potentially be trimmed. The media team, the number could potentially be trimmed so that we work with an efficient system where the numbers are less, and then the representatives who go ahead are able to feed information to others who don't need to necessarily travel ahead with them. I'm saying this because in the past, some government officials, even without coming out to make announcements, have made that decision in order to be prudent with government spending. So that's possible. Now, if that is all covered, then who will make up the 20? It then almost seems as if the president still doesn't need 20 people to go with him, on official trips. So what has been suggested is perhaps the number 20 should be at the maximum. Therefore, each trip doesn't have to have 20, assistants or personnel follow him. So, for instance, if he's going for an economic summit, for instance, he takes, a member of his economic team, a few principal officers, the ministers, one or two of them. Then there's enough space not to take all 20 of them along with him if his other professional service team are already spoken for. The same with the vice president. Now, there are conversations around that of the wife of the president who, coincidentally has the same number of allowances as the vice president. So does this equate the office of the first lady to that of the office of the vice president, especially when it comes to international trips? And the same with the wife of the vice president. I think these are things to look into. Why, if she's going to have her security team, protocol team not included in that number, then why do we need a number of people? 1 or 2 aides is okay for her to go ahead with in terms of, giving advice on professional issues or very technical matters when they go on, on visits on behalf of the state. Beyond that is the fact that they must also look into perhaps the internally as to coming down to visiting states in Nigeria and cutting that down as well. Another aspect that will be looked into will be training personnel in states. It's not enough to say that we'll work with the security architecture in the states when we go visit within Nigeria. It is also important to ensure that these personnel are also trained to receive the president, the vice president, and members of the presidency. I think that's quite critical to mention. And so, again, just saying well done to the president. There's still more to be done. Perhaps look at those numbers and make it at the very maximum. So in the event that you don't need to take up to 25 members of staff in your entourage, then by all means do so. It sends the right signals to Nigerians whom you've asked to make sacrifices and cut, and trim their own lifestyle. It's important to see leadership by example. So this is excellent. Again, I'll make that reiteration. It's been done in the past. A previous serving government official had made the decision to trim down his own entourage and actually enabled his team members to do double work in terms of ensuring they were able to serve in different capacities when they were abroad, all in the interest of the state. It is possible, and we welcome this development, and we hope that we'll see, punitive measures if this is gone against. Move on to other story. So the next story. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, yesterday questioned suspended Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Dr. Betta Edu, over payment of 585 million naira public funds into a private account. Edu's interrogation came as heads of the country's two anti-graft agencies, EFCC and Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, Ola Olukoyede and Musa Aliyu, SAN, respectively, vow that no Nigerian is above the law. They made the declaration when Aliyu visited Olukoyede at the EFCC headquarters in what they said was meant to deepen collaboration between the two anti-corruption agencies. Both men said the two agencies would investigate any public officer who failed to play by the rules. Olukoyede and Aliyu said events of the last 48 hours had shown beyond doubt President Bola Tinubu's commitment to containing corruption in public offices. Minister of Interior Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo yesterday visited the presidential villa to meet with President Bola Tinubu. The purpose of his visit remains unclear, similar to other counterparts spotted at the presidential villa. Unfortunately, they were unable to meet the president, who rescheduled most of his meetings. While it's common for ministers to have private meetings with the president for ministry updates, Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo's visit comes on the heels of financial improprieties at the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, leading to the suspension of Minister Betta Edu. There are allegations of his involvement in a company that received over 400 million in a consultancy contract from the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation. He denies any wrongdoing. Well, meanwhile, the People's Democratic Party has asked and called for the immediate suspension, investigation and possible prosecution of Tunji-Ojo over his reported involvement in the alleged scandal involving Dr. Betta Edu. In a statement issued by its National Publicity Secretary, Debo Ologunagba, the party described as inexcusable that the two ministers directly entrusted with the well-being of Nigerians reportedly used a company in which the Minister of Interior has a huge interest to allegedly siphon funds meant for poor Nigerians under the guise of consultancy fee for unsubstantiated verification of households in the country. Right. Okay. This is an update. It's a story, Dr. Bati. I'm sure you've been following what has been termed Bettergate, and Rufai, your take on this update.
I mean, Bettergate. So, Betta started talking to the EFCC. She was probably there with her lawyers yesterday and her aide, and I'm sure that they're going to grill and ask her very important questions. I hazard that the questions that will be asked Betta will be centered around, the way she had run the ministry. Probably they want to see files as regards authorizations for payments she had made in the past, a breakdown of how monies were spent, various intervention programs, the need for those projects, what was the cost analysis of those projects, were the project cost inflated. Also, there should be a forensic audit of various signatures signed from the start of our work till date. Also, there should be a forensic audit of documents. And also, if the Humanitarian Ministry has got a server, the EFCC too should be able to look into the server to be able to ascertain various transactions. Also, probably the questions they should or they will also ask would be around contracts. Were those contracts properly, the bidding process properly done? What was the stage of, what was the level of transparency for those bidding projects? Why will a consultancy service, just for verification of names, cost hundreds of millions? Why was it given to the company where Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo was stakeholder, shareholder? In as much as he said he had resigned in 2019 from the directorial board, but he was still a shareholder of the company. Were there other companies that could have done that job at a lesser cost? Where is the public tender for that specific contract? How many other companies were given the chance to be able to try out that contract? Also, they should probably scan through exchanges between the both parties. I'm talking about Tunji-Ojo and Betta, and see if there's any level of complicity there. These are the very important questions I think Nigerians will also want to know. But also going further and stretching it further. Olubumitunjojo tried to see the president yesterday, but President Tinubu had to reschedule because of some matters came up, I think, around the Niger situation and all of that. Let's see how this matter pans out in the coming days. Olubumitunjojo is still doing his job. By the way, I will say he's doing a yeoman's job at the Ministry of Interior with the new online portal, for registration and getting your passport quickly. But investigations also need to be made. Also, we have to also further bolster our civil service law based on needs assessment of this situation. So we have to have clear guidelines. Can a civil servant be a shareholder in a company that does work for government? Because like you pointed out rightly yesterday, Ayo, predominantly this company pretty much does everything for government. I can say they're a government contractor. Yeah. So can a civil servant, can a minister do that and be a shareholder in that company? The question is, did he also have a certain level of full disclosure before all of this? Those are questions we'll ask. Yeah, probably he might have made disclosure. I don't know, Code of Conduct Bureau. But most importantly, should be how the contracts were awarded. Was there a proper competition and bidding due process that went on? I mean, I think these are the things a lot of Nigerians will also know. And also, by grand extension, the investigation that Mr. Edo, the Minister of Finance, will be looking at, should also have sort of like a forensic audit on paper trails for transaction. I know it's going to cost a lot, but it's better we do it when you look at the money we are losing to all of this. Secondly, I think this should also lead to a highly, very competitive, what I call government procurement portal system, which probably as conversations go on, I'll be able to espouse more ideas on.
Well, the law is very clear. The Code of Conduct law, sections 5 and 6, state very clearly that you cannot, as a public officer, be involved in any form of private business, except farming. If you are a farmer, that's fine. And that is the purpose of those two sections, is to prevent conflict of interest. So you cannot come and say, I resigned as a director, but I'm still a shareholder. What is the difference between being a shareholder and being a director? You still have, relevant interest in that particular business, particularly in a business where your wife is also a major director and you are the biggest shareholder. So the argument by the Interior Minister is completely specious. We were told that he spent 2 hours at the villa yesterday between 10 a.m. and left, or more than 2 hours, and left after 2 p.m. Some of his handlers have said he wasn't summoned by the president, that he went there for something else. Whether he was summoned or not, this matter was on the table. And the State House press corps appropriately asked him question. In one breath, he was reported as saying, it's all good. Well, what is all good? And then in another breath, he said to have said, we are too intelligent to be stupid. What does that mean? Where conflict of interest can be established, it is strictly what it is, conflict of interest. Okay? Because what he may be accused of, even if he says he's a shareholder, is he guilty of what they call the peddling of corrupt influence? If you are a minister and you are associated with a company, New Planet Project Limited, and as a result of being a minister, your New Planet project is on a new planet, getting consultancies here and there, then of course, questions can be legitimately raised. And some of the relevant questions have been posed by Rufai Oseni, to wit, how did he get how did that New Planet project get the contract? Why is he so popular as a contractor in government? Is it because the minister is peddling influence from ministry to ministry and doing so far more robustly at the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation? And why would the Minister of Interior have so much influence over the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs? Even that relationship part of it may well also be interrogated, because we're talking about the peddling of corrupt influence here. Okay? And then was there a tender? Then what is the nature of the consultancy? Okay, to reviews register. Just to review social register, social investment register, then the money is 438.1 million. How did the ministry arrive at that? These are all the relevant questions, that the investigating agencies can raise. However, apart from the Minister of Interior, who has been dragged into the matter, and the PDP, People's Democratic Party, is saying he too has a case to answer. Some other groups, even the YPP, the political party YPP, Young People's Progressive Party, they too are saying he has a case to answer. So the matter is there in the public domain. Then you go to the Better Do side, or what is now being called the Better Gate. Now, Better Gate has been invited, yes. We are told that even the former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Shadiya Umar Farouk, has also been invited, and that the authorities are looking at about 40 billion. So nobody is above the law. That point that was made in the introduction is appropriate. But at the same time also, people should be, interrogated on the basis of the facts, not on the basis of emotional, masturbation that we have found around this subject within the public space. And the investigators, either EFCC or ICPC, they are very well-trained people, who have been very well-trained. Some of them had attachments with MI5, and, they've been everywhere in the world. So they know their job. They know what to look for. They know, but nobody should be crucified merely on the basis of emotion. That point is also important. All the persons who have been invited should be given their right to fair hearing to defend themselves. Beyond all of this, however, has to do with the administration. I think I'll start by saying, well, President Tinubu has done well by saying, look, these ministers, the EFCC should do its work. I think he got the message. You will recall that during the campaigns, one of the major concerns by public commentators was that, President Tinubu was not strong on the issue of corruption. He's not talking enough about corruption. Whereas it was part of the Renewed Hope manifesto. But it was one point. Now, in less than 7 months, or within 7 months, the same president is now confronted with a major scandal. A scandal is a scandal. There's no point in saying good scandal, bad scandal. There's no such thing. And what is emerging, right, before the president, is a major scandal in terms of sleaze within the government. Can you imagine the woman in charge of the Social Investment Program Agency saying that, Better Do took 3 billion and put in a private account. So she quickly took 37 billion and put in another private account. I mean, that's sleaze, working on stilts. And so that's why I said the president got the message. And to address the issue of the credibility of his government, he has acted decisively by allowing the security agencies, the investigating agencies, to move in. People have asked him to go a step further, which is not just to suspend the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, but also to go ahead and suspend the Minister of the Interior. Because no president takes bullets for his appointees. If a president begins to take bullets for his appointees, then that government will collapse. The reputation will be totally, irreparably damaged. So President Tinubu cannot take bullets for his appointees. It is the appointees that should take bullets for the president. But it is also important to establish either their culpability or innocence. When we were in government, there was a similar situation. The president had to say, well, this man has to go. But even at some point, the president said couldn't agree. We use dismiss. He said, no, don't dismiss him. Have human feeling. Fired. He said, no, don't fire. Sack, don't sack. Okay, eventually the statement will put us, the president of Nigeria has accepted the resignation of so minister. And that was how that matter was resolved. But that's another story entirely. I think President Tinubu should allow the security agencies to do their work. And the security agencies must not do buggy man's job. It's not a buggy man's job. They should do a professional work and respect the rights of all parties concerned.
Well, one part of the story I must also highlight is the coming together of the two anti-corruption agencies, where the head of the ICPC visited the head of the EFCC. In this instance, Mr. Musa Aliyu, SAN, and Mr. Ola Olukoyede, respectively. One of the things they mentioned as we are talking about avoiding duplication of responsibilities or duties and also saving public costs or government funding is this move, and I think it ought to be applauded. They did acknowledge that there's an MOU, a memorandum of understanding between the two agencies to enable them work together, because in some parts their functions will overlap. So I think this is quite excellent. Rather than two agencies doing exactly the same thing or very similar things, working independently, it's wasting money and wasting the time of people. So I think this has to be commended. And beyond that, of course, what has already been said, the hard stance on these agencies, that no one is above the law. And I want to take this forward. The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, present and previous, which is quite a shame because they are the only ministers so far, and both of them are concurrently at the same time facing the EFCC. And so that again puts a bit of a microscopic lens on that particular ministry. I'm still of the opinion that it should still exist. However, the leakages ought to be plugged, because if we don't plug the leakages, then the same thing that happened in the last two ministers will then continue, because it seems as if there's just a reign of impunity and a reign of lawlessness and a reign of just whoever is able to grab the cake is able to just eat it and move. Imagine the internal conflicts being who will take more because this person has transferred to a personal account. That goes beyond thinking. It means that as an institution, it is a very weak institution, and there are processes that are not being adhered to, and there are many opportunities for wastages and corruption because they haven't been plugged. So one of the things I'd really encourage would be that during the investigation by the Minister of Finance, they should also find ways to plug leakages in this ministry, because it seems like it's a free-for-all. The person who gets to be minister in that ministry, even if the person didn't go with intention, there's just an opportunity to just take money and transfer, because there's a lot of movement of cash from one person to another. Also, perhaps tighten the process. What the minister had assured us when she got into office was that she was going to ensure that monies were sent into bank accounts. Can we make that a standing rule in that ministry? Because obviously, this cash transfer or giving of cash, actual cash, has posed serious issues and challenges and opportunities for looting, free looting in that particular ministry. So I believe those are things, and then there are many, many lessons that can be learned from this ministry, that applies to other ministries in Nigeria. Really great to see that the president is taking a hard stance against corruption under this administration, and we hope that it will continue across others. And like the EFCC and ICPC bosses have said, no one, I repeat, no one should be above the law. Because again, it has been said that perhaps, this is just a, fall person for this administration. There are many others who are doing this in their ministries. Perhaps a fuller investigation would reveal that. And I hope that will be conducted. Now, moving away from that, going to Mr. Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo. I mean, this is for me with mixed feelings, because as a number of people have touted him or pegged him as a star boy of this administration, it's very sad when we see a minister who is obviously doing work and in a short period of time has done significant, made significant improvement in that ministry, to be caught up in this kind of scandal. Again, it's still subject to full investigation, even though the optics already do not look good. However, he's innocent until proven guilty. And in the event that he's guilty, sadly, in order to make an example of him, he might have to, the recommendation would be for the president to wield the big stick against him. As much as it hurts me even now to say it, because, I was even considering that should he be let off on good behavior? You know how you say, okay, let some people, good behavior, don't do that again. But the truth is that if we're going to fix the nation, if we're going to take a hard stance on corruption, then heads must roll. There must be examples made to deter others from doing that. I suspect that other ministers who are shareholders but are not directors, in quotes, of certain private companies will begin to find a way to sort themselves out now. And this is the power of examples. This is the power of punitive measures when there are infractions, because people will start to put their acts together and put their houses in order. Because I can bet you that Mr. Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo is not the only one who is guilty of this, or in terms of having interest in private organizations and still serving in government. However, the action of the president would then make a big statement in order to deter others from continuously doing this and also influencing projects or contracts in their favor. There must be sanity in government. And like someone has said, as great a brain as he is, there are many great brains in Nigeria. There are many people who can do great work. But I do hope that he's able to, some way or the other, clear his name if he's able to. In the event that he's not, then unfortunately, if the president is being fair and, if it's in fairness, then he must have to also take, the punitive measures for his actions. Well, it's still an unfolding story. The EFCC will investigate, interview. I hear some bank chiefs were also invited. They said they weren't arrested. Just invited as well to answer some of the questions based on their involvement in this particular transfer from a government agency to a private account, what their roles were in this. And so it's great to see and the anti-corruption agencies really do their work. A departure from what we've seen in the past, even though the EFCC has consistently come up with ways to catch corruption, especially in high places. Not many high-profile convictions have been seen. We wait to see what this will unfold and how this will unfold, and we hope that we'll see this matter to the very end.